Okay, welcome everybody. Today is our Relax into Health, Wealth, and Happiness meeting, and it's nice to have you here. So today I'd like to explore this theme of falling in love with your own life. Because it occurs to me that we have this choice that maybe we don't often realize that we have. And because we don't realize that we have this choice, we may be defaulting to something other than falling in love with our own life. And then we might be interested to start to question what is the consequence of what I'm defaulting to, and what might it be like if I was to fall in love with my own life. I suppose that idea of falling in love with your own life might seem a bit risky. Maybe in multiple ways it might appear to pose a kind of threat. Well, if you were to fall in love with your own life, then wouldn't you just be falling into some kind of delusion? Isn't the whole point to wake up and fall out of love with yourself in a sense? Aren't you supposed to, isn't that what we're supposed to do? Aren't we some? But again, I would just say, look at the consequences of what you've been defaulting to if you haven't been defaulting to authentically falling in love with your own life. So maybe it is necessary for me to clarify what I mean when I say fall in love with your own life, because I'm certainly not proposing that you should become narcissistic in the worst sense of the word, that you should indulge delusional thinking or wrong identification. But what I am pointing out is that if we're not authentically in love with our own life, then we're excluding the divine. So there's a story that for those of you who were there on Friday, you will have heard the story, but it's, I think, a pretty good story, so I'll share it again. So this is a story from Hindu mythology, and there's this guy Daksha who is he's the one of the main patriarchs. He's the father of many very important people, and one of his daughters, Sati, he has many daughters, but one of his daughters, Sati, is married to Lord Shiva. And this is important, which you'll find out momentarily. So Daksha is thinking he's a pretty important guy, because he is a pretty important guy. He's really responsible for a large part of the creation in terms of, well, a large part of the creation. So pretty important guy, really, honestly, very, very important guy. But he's thinking that he really wants to kind of seal his status as the lead guy. He wants everybody to agree he's the most important. He's the main patriarch. Everybody should recognize him and say, that Daksha, we really think he's fantastic. So he's going to have this ceremony, this ritual. He's going to perform a ritual that's going to help with this. And so he invites big party. He's going to invite everybody. He invites all the gods, all the demigods, all of the various, rishis, and all the important people, and somewhat less important people, and people who are slightly less important than that. He invites all of them except Sati and Shiva. And he doesn't invite them because he says this Shiva fellow is he's wild, he's crazy, he's the Lord of Beasts. I don't want to have anything to do with him. He's offensive and rude and unkempt and all kinds of bad things. I just don't want to have him coming to my party and ruining and spoiling everything. Well, Sati learns of this and she's very upset. How could her father have done this? It's the worst sort of thing possible. And so you can imagine she's really upset about this and stewing about it and fuming, and Shiva is saying, don't worry about it. Who cares? It's just, a stupid party. We've got, all of eternity. It doesn't matter at all. And truthfully, it does not matter at all. But Sati doesn't want to hear it. And so she goes and crashes her father's party and she throws a big fit and says, how could you have offended me and my husband like this? You need to, say you're sorry and extend an invitation to us right now, which he won't do. He says, no, I stand by it. I didn't want your stupid husband here. And so this is intolerable to her. So she uses her yogic powers and she ignites a powerful fire within herself and incinerates herself from within. And Shiva, being omniscient, instantly knows what has happened, and now he's really now he's upset, and so from this rage that's in him, this sweat is forming on his brow. He's trying to control it, but it can't be controlled and contained, and a drop of sweat falls from his brow and falls to the earth, and from it is this being is born, Virabhadra, who's he's the ultimate warrior, and he's described as he's all flames and fire and blood red and 1,000 heads and 1,000 arms and all he's terrible, absolutely terrible. And he says, what do you command me to do, Lord? And Shiva says, go destroy Daksha's party and Daksha himself. So this is what Virabhadra does. And after he destroys the party, he decapitates Daksha. So and then he's elevated to the celestial realms, and so he becomes the celestial body that we call Mars today. Well, one thing that I didn't say on Friday that occurs to me is that an important thing to note from what is the moral of this tale, which is when you're going to throw a big party, be sure to invite the divine. Not because they'll destroy your life necessarily, but because it would be a terrible mistake. So let's not exclude the divine. And so, in this tale, Sati and Shiva they're inseparable. This is the thing. This is why Shiva, after this whole thing takes place, then Shiva, in his grief, he retreats to Mount Kailash, which is where he's wont to go anyway, and does what he does best. He's the Adi Yoga, which means that he's the prime yogi. His gig is just sitting in meditation on Mount Kailash. That's what he likes to do. So he seizes the opportunity. There's nothing in this creation for him anyway now. So he goes to Mount Kailash and sits in meditation, withdraws entirely from the creation. And so the point that I'm making now is that Shiva and his consort are inseparable. They are one. They can't be divided. And if we attempt, if that occurs, then we're in big trouble. So then what happens is our lives become chaos, because there's no presence here to create the coherence. So we have to include the divine in our lives. And if we exclude the divine, then the divine will retreat. And then we'll end up with a mess. So, okay, so back to falling in love with your own life. That if we're not falling in love with our own life, then we're failing to invite the divine. So, um, so I would just invite you to take a look and see right now in this moment, have you invited the divine here right now? Have you invited the divine today into your life? Have you invited the divine in the last 15 minutes, in the last hour? And maybe more significant is, where do you exclude the divine? You know, in this story, Daksha's throwing this big party because rightfully he's a big deal. Honestly, he's a very big deal, but um, so what? Because where did um, yes, he's a big deal, but where did he come from? Where did his life come from? How did he come to be? I mean, in the stories, I think he's the, I don't know, he's maybe the grandson of Brahma or something like that, which is really just telling us that he like all of us is a created being. So he also is an emanation of the divine. But this is what happens is we, for better or for worse in our lives, you know, whether we think that things are going well or we think that things are going poorly, we start to exclude the divine. We say, I'm going to take credit for this, for the good or the bad. But where do we exclude the divine? You know, when you're, you know, like to be a bit crude, when you're on the toilet, do you include the divine? Maybe you haven't thought about that. But you know, are there times when what about when you what about when your mind has negative thoughts? Do you hide from the divine? Do you exclude the divine? Just see, where are the times and places and situations where you don't invite the divine? When you're experiencing pleasure, do you include the divine? So that's one aspect of falling in love with our own lives, is that if see, the love itself is divine. So consider that for a moment. That love, we could say, is the uh, is an attractive force. We could just describe that love is the attractive force. And so what else is it other than divine? And so if we're to fall in love with our own lives, then it necessarily means that we're inviting the divine, because the love itself is divine. So to fall in love sincerely in the way that I'm talking about with your own life is not this narcissistic thing in the negative sense, but it is to actually recognize what is the source of your life, what is the substance of your life, what is this life really? Because otherwise, you just notice what happens. If you're not falling in love with your life, if you're not inviting the divine, if you're not recognizing moment to moment the actual source and substance of your life, if you're imagining that you are cut off, isolated, separate, then what is the result of that? What's the consequence of that? And what's the point of that? And I would argue that if you really sincerely look at that, then you'd have to conclude that actually there is no point then, that it really becomes utterly pointless, which I think is why this presently in the culture broadly, there's such an absence of an authentic sense of meaning, that it's all relativistic and ultimately empty and pointless, so far as most people can determine, because who we imagine ourselves to be is pointless. You know, what is the point of a life that's only about just getting through, or whatever other things people often imagine their lives are about, you know, getting a bunch of money or comfort or prestige or power or all these kinds of things. They're ultimately completely empty. So that's one aspect of falling in love with your own life. And the other aspect of falling in love with your own life is that when you really are willing to acknowledge and find and discover that your life is divine, that your life is it's the substance and source of your very life is entirely divine, then you realize that your life is meaningful. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to consciously be able to articulate what that meaning is. You may not really know on a conscious level what that meaning is, but you can intuit it. And when I say that, I don't mean that you know, like, that you could narrate it or write it down, but just that when you connect with the reality that your life is divine, then it becomes clear, at least intuitively, that your life is meaningful. So then I think that you can hopefully see that this really changes things quite radically. You know, normally, at least unless, if you don't, let me put it this way, in contrast with not recognizing that your life is divine, uh, then it becomes apparent that your life is meaningful. So that meaning is an unfolding revelation. So I think that in the maybe in the biggest sense of the meaning, we could say that the purpose of your life is to know yourself. But you don't know yourself to begin with, right? At the beginning, you don't have that clarity. So it's not like you can't define the goal to begin with. Rather, you just we have to know that in the biggest sense, it is to know yourself, but you don't know what that self is that you're to know. But you can intuit it because you are it. So that might sound a bit mysterious and vague, but think about it in terms of stories that we all know. So any familiar story that follows the general structure of the hero's journey, as Joseph Campbell has described that. What is it that we find is that there's something that's already there in the hero, but hasn't been brought forth. So it's there in its potential at the beginning, but there's this journey that's undertaken, and then at the end, what is revealed is what was there in potential, but now it's realized. So think about um, in The Wizard of Oz. Dorothy goes on this journey, and then in the end, what is the end? Is there's no place like home. So she has to go on this journey to realize who she is and what home is. And the lion wants to have courage, I think, and so he it was there all along, but he had to go on the journey to discover it, etc. So to fall in love with your life in this sense of the meaning is to appreciate that there is a purpose of your life, and that purpose is to reveal the in actuality, and to reveal and realize what it is that's already there in potential, who you are. So oftentimes in these stories, the hero is enticed by some kind of prize. There's the Holy Grail, or there's this thing that's going to be attained. But ultimately, the realization is what is really true and meaningful about the journey is the revelation of who one is. The prize is secondary, and the prize is really more um, uh, to seduce the hero into the whole thing. So whatever it is that if we're thinking that we have to get some outer prize in our life, which that's how we're usually conditioned, is to imagine that there's some kind of outer thing that we need to attain, whatever that is. Even if it's a non-tangible thing, it's nonetheless often we project it out there, like we need other people's love or approval or acceptance or something like that. We need to have some kind of validation. We need to have it reflected back to us that we're okay, successful. And in a sense, all the other things that we think we want, the money and the fame and the power and all these kinds of things, all are really just stand-ins for that anyway, right? I mean, you can't eat money. You can't clothe yourself in money. Money doesn't directly in and of itself do any of those things. But what it does is it offers you that it's a stand-in for what you're wanting, and that's still projected outside of you. But ultimately, you can't take any of that with you, right? At the end of the life, none of that goes with you. What goes with you is yourself and the clarity of yourself. So all of the other outer props are there just in support of the journey of our own life, to entice us and seduce us, and to reflect back to us how we're doing, so that we can undertake this journey. But you're not going to take the journey if you haven't fallen in love with your own life. And so that's this other meaning of falling in love with your own life that I'm talking about here, is that if you don't appreciate that your life has meaning, then you won't do what is required in order to undertake that journey. If you believe that life is pointless ultimately, and that none of it matters really. On one level, that's true, that nothing really matters, but on another level, everything matters a great deal. Not for its own sake, but it matters in as much as it can reveal yourself to you. And so we have to undertake the outer journey in order to discover who we really are. And that if we don't do that, if we don't appreciate the meaning of our life, that our life is divine and meaningful, if we're not willing to fall in love with it, and we're not willing to go all in and really honestly stake everything on this, to say, I'm not holding anything back, I'm going to go fully into this, then what are we hoping that we're going what are we hoping for then? Because then I really question what we're doing. So to in my view, to fall in love with your life authentically is essential, because without that you won't risk what's necessary. And it seems to me that everything, that it's the most important thing, that there's nothing else that really can offer this, that what it is that's really needed here. Because if you think about, if we're looking to define our success by outer measures of what other people say and what other people think and what the world says, and what's culturally acceptable, what's going to give us approval, then it's not really going to offer us anything of real value. Because in the end, you can pat yourself on the back all day, sort of like this guy Daksha, you say, look, I'm the greatest. But if you can do all kinds of, make millions of dollars and be a great philanthropist, and save orphans, and save the whales, and all kinds of things that are maybe in some sense important, but at the cost of your own soul. And I'm not saying, sometimes those things are done as an authentic expression of the soul, in which case there's no problem. But if it's done at a cost of your own soul, then what was the point? So again, back to the story of Daksha. So Daksha is, he really is an important fellow, but he misses the most important point at the critical moment. And so this is, just pointing out, is useful for us, is we can just start to look and see so how am I excluding the divine? Why do I exclude the divine? Well, what are the consequences of excluding the divine? And then to look and see what might be to start to look at how, what is it that I'm hoping for, with what's the motivation of my choices and actions day to day? See that, is this action motivated from a direct revelation of the meaning, purpose, and value inherent in my life? If I recognize that my life is truly divine and inherently meaningful, then is that what is motivating this that I'm choosing now? Or is my choice presently motivated by just trying to avoid something uncomfortable? Because the point I'm trying to make here is that if we start to appreciate our life as meaningful and divine, then we start to see that that this dynamic outer life is an unfolding story, and it's an interactive story in which we get to participate to discover ourselves, which is the fulfillment of the life. Then we start to see that it is a hero's journey. And not that, because the thing about the hero's journey is that if we really, that we have an idea often maybe about heroes. I don't know if you have this idea, but I think it's a popular idea about heroes, that a hero, there's something that the hero is just great through and through. Everything's great about the hero. But if you think about the heroes are always flawed. I think about as an example, think about if you're familiar with the story of Lord of the Rings. So Frodo is this hobbit who is called into this adventure to help save the world, as it were, from evil. There's this dark force that's taking over, and it is going to solidify its ultimate power if it can get hold of this one ring. And so Frodo is brought into this adventure to try and destroy this one ring to prevent this dark force from taking over. And he shows weaknesses along the way, but at the very end, just when we're like, boy, the hero is supposed to do this great thing at the very end, slay the dragon or do whatever it is, but actually Frodo fails. If you really reflect on that, you'll realize, if you are familiar with the story, he couldn't bring himself to do it, or at least he never actually got to fulfill that heroic quest, in a sense, because he was tempted in the last moment, and it was only the ring was only destroyed. I'm sorry, it's a spoiler alert here. You can plug your ears if you don't know the end. But he was on. What happens in the end is that his doppelganger, this Gollum character, in his own greed, attempts to grab the ring from Frodo, but slips and falls into the fire below, and so the Gollum and the ring are both destroyed. So the thing about our understanding our lives as a hero's journey is not that we're not being held up to some unrealistic standard where we have to be our idea of what a hero is. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to get everything right. You don't have to achieve some outwardly big thing. None of that's required. You don't have to get any kind of credit or fame or anything. Everybody else might still think you're a jerk. Probably not you, because you're probably a lovely person, but I'm just talking about myself here. But you have the thing about the hero's journey is not about that. It's about, again, the revelation of the self, not as we want it to be, but as it is. And the only way at least that I'm aware of, to actually fulfill that purpose is to engage with the life. And the only way to engage honestly with the life that I'm aware of is to fall in love with it. Because if we don't, then we'll be very, very, very tempted to fall asleep, to try and avoid the discomfort. Because if you think about any hero's journey, there's an awful lot of discomfort involved. I mean, I think, they're just all thoroughly uncomfortable. There's nothing about them that's comfortable at all. And the hero just has to keep at it. And I don't know about you, but I guess the reason I'm saying all this is because certainly I can relate that to my own life. And probably you can too, because I think that's just the nature of it. I think that's why these tales have such a universal appeal, is because they speak directly to our actual experience of life. They address the mystery and the murkiness of our own life. They point out all of this semi-hidden stuff. I mean, it's not really hidden, but we certainly would like to sweep it under the rug, all of the inconvenient things about how none of it's how we think it should be. And most certainly we're not how we think we're supposed to be. And so that can all be quite uncomfortable, but that's what it is that we're called to be present to, and to fall in love with that life, that journey that is uniquely and perfectly crafted for us. Back again to the point that this life is divinely sourced and substanced, that it's so perfectly crafted that there's nothing, every little detail is rich with opportunity. All we have to do is say yes to it. I mean, that sounds so easy, but to say yes to it, not a small thing, but that to say repeatedly yes to this life, to your life, is in a sense all that's required. So to me, that's a miracle. That's it's why we can relax into health, wealth, and happiness. It's not like, again, I often point out, it's not the relaxation is not what we think it is. It's not like just, lie down on the sofa and watch soap operas kind of relaxation. That's a different kind of thing. In fact, that kind of relaxation, if we really tell the truth about it, it's not so relaxing, because that sends us unconscious. And so it's like if the hero doesn't undertake the journey, again, let's go back to the Lord of the Rings. In that tale, if the hero doesn't undertake the journey, then this evil is sweeping the land. If Frodo just says, you know what, I'm just going to hang out here and just watch soap operas and lounge on the couch, then that doesn't last for very long. You can live in ignorance for a little bit, but the darkness is coming. And so in our own lives, it's the same, that the relaxation isn't really that relaxing if we think that relaxation is just about trying to ignore all of the discomfort and inconvenience and all of that kind of thing. But when we understand that the relaxation is a dynamic relaxation, that it's about learning how to say yes to this life, then it's opens things up in a really powerful new way. So then it's not about, my life is no longer about how can I just be comfortable and feel that things are convenient for me. How can I feel good in the way that I presently understand good, which turns out to be not so good, actually. then we start to realize, oh, actually, maybe it's different than that. So what if I start to fall in love with my life, say yes to my life? So, and appreciate and understand that my life is divinely made and perfectly made, so that everything that happens, every tiny little detail is perfect. Nothing's a mistake. Everything is provided from, so again, come back to what is the nature of the divine, is that it is love. And it's not just our idea of love, it's unconditional love. So every detail of this life is an expression of unconditional love. Well, that's not necessarily going to fit with my idea of what love is. But if I stop clinging to my idea, my narrow, limited idea of what love is, and I open to the reality that this is actually an expression, a perfect, endlessly perfect expression of unconditional love, then, and every tiny detail included, then I'm humbled and I'm in a position of learning, so that that who I am can be revealed to me. Because if I'm insisting I know who I am, how is it going to be revealed to me? If I already think I know, it can't be revealed to me. If I say, oh, I know that I'm great, I'm very successful. I mean, or maybe we don't think that about ourselves, but just as one example, maybe I think, oh, I'm great, I'm very successful. How is it going to be revealed to me who I really am? Because who I really am can't be just that. Said that the divine is everything. Nothing's excluded. So to say yes to your life means it is to relax into health, wealth, and happiness, but it's an active, dynamic relaxation, meaning that you notice how much resistance is involved in saying no, judging and condemning, saying, I already know from the get-go what all this is and it's bad and I don't want anything to do with it because it's inconvenient and uncomfortable. That actually requires a tremendous amount of effort versus the kind of relaxation that I'm pointing out, which is to say yes, to say, okay, it's not what I had in mind. It's not what I thought. It's not what I thought would be convenient or comfortable. I noticed some resistance to it, but I'm saying yes without knowing in advance what that means, without knowing in advance. Because again, you can't very well go on the adventure or the journey if you have to know every little detail in advance. And if you knew every little detail in advance, you wouldn't do it. So you can't know in advance. It's better not to know, because only if you don't know will you do it. So you just have to say yes, even though I don't know, even though it might be uncomfortable, even though I might be found out. Maybe I'll even find myself out that I'm a fraud, that I'm a liar, that I've been lying to myself and others about very fundamental things about who I am and what I want. So, but again, to fall in love with your life means to say that I accept that my life is divine. So there can't be anything about it that is a mistake. And so I'm going to say yes to it with that understanding that my life is divine. It's all perfect, not in my idea of perfect, but rather that my to the degree that my idea of perfection and the reality of perfection are not matching up, that's my ignorance, and that can be remedied by me saying yes and falling in love with my life enough, having enough, a willingness to love my life enough that I won't turn away from it because it's inconvenient or uncomfortable. uh, because I accept its inherent meaning and value enough that I'm willing to continue to persist in it and not zone out or check out. That I'm willing to accept that um, that I am on a hero's journey, and that doesn't mean that I have to be my idea of a hero, but that I can have it revealed to me what the hero actually is, and that is actually me, not in my idea of what it is, but in the reality of it, which may have the appearance of being flawed, may have the appearance of making mistakes, may have the appearance of uh, all kinds of weaknesses, but that it's important, inherently important enough that I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to say yes. And the real, um, I've already kind of said this, but I'll just to make the point more clearly, that the we can do a lot of deceptive um, manipulation with all of this and pretend like we have some other choice. But actually, I think if you look really honestly, you'll see what I see, which is that there's not really a choice in the matter. You are here to know yourself, and be yourself, and that's not optional. So maybe there's some degree of choice in the matter, but that choice is not about whether or not you get to be yourself and know yourself. The choice is just how long and how difficult do you want it to be. And if you say, well, it's already been long enough and difficult enough, then great. Start falling in love with your life and saying yes right now, because if you don't, it's only going to take longer and be harder. And saying yes now does not mean it's going to be easy and convenient from here on out, because there's a there is a journey, and if you don't take the journey, you can't learn what needs to be learned. It won't be revealed to you, because that only comes about through these um, challenges that have to be met, because they draw us out of ourselves so that we can actually discover something. So we have to be willing to cross these thresholds over and over and over again, where we say, all right, I'm going for it. And I cross that threshold and I can't go back. And it's an important part of the process. This is because if you can go back, you will go back. You know, when the going gets tough, you're not tough enough to keep going. Neither am I. Nobody is, unless you can't go back. So that's why to cross these thresholds, which occur just to say yes to your life when the habit is to say no, to actually take the action, to take the step, to go into these places where you maybe rather not. But something within you knows that that's necessary, that you've tried to avoid it, but the attempts to avoid it have only actually resulted in more discomfort. It's like you're Frodo, you've been lounging on the sofa watching soap operas, and at first you could pretend like that evil wasn't out there, and then you could turn up the volume of your soap opera so that you could try to drown out and ignore the din that's out there of the evil clashing with the forces of good outside your door. Now it's knocking on your door. what are you gonna, how much longer can you ignore it? Not for much longer. So that's why I'm saying that now is the best time to say yes, because if we postpone it, it's not going to get easier, but it's not something we can avoid in any case. So why not now? And this is, it's been said by some that, so some people say, I've suggested the purpose of life is to know who you are, to uh, have the direct revelation of and realization of yourself. Others have said it differently. They've said it's to die before you die. Maybe you've heard that idea. And I would say it's the same thing. But if we understand it from all these different perspectives and see that all of them are true, then it kind of rounds out our understanding in a helpful way. So to see that it's to die before you die is to die to the false notions of yourself, the false notion that I just want comfort and convenience, or I can't do that. It would be too hard or too scary, or it will be better if I just ignore it, or why me, or it's not fair, or any of the other things we can tell ourselves about any of it. Like it's not fair is, oh, it's not. The context for that might be, oh, it's not fair that I have it so difficult. Why do I suffer the way that I do? It's not fair. I try so hard. I do so many things, and look at all those other people. They're not suffering like I am. It's not fair. But these are just things that they hold us back from realizing who we really are. Because the idea of fairness is itself is false. It doesn't apply because you are you. You're not anybody else. And if you start to see and accept that the purpose of your life is to know yourself, to reveal yourself, to realize yourself, then it doesn't matter. Fairness doesn't even make any sense anymore. That instead you start to realize, wow, as I've been pointing out, my life is a divine gift. My life is divinely made. My life is absolutely perfectly crafted down to every little detail to support the unfoldment of this purpose of self-realization. So then we can start to say yes to our lives, to venture out on this journey of self-realization, and to be rewarded by the riches of living that truthfully. So that's all I have to say about that today. I hope that has been valuable to you. And for those who are here live, if you have anything that you'd like to share, I'm happy to stay on for Q&A. For this, I'm going to end this video momentarily. And before I do, I'll say to everybody, including those who will watch it on YouTube, thank you for joining. Blessings to you all, and I'll see you next time.